to the Event Manager podcast. The title of this episode is The Sweet Spot for Interactivity at Virtual Events. My name is Miguel Neves and I'm the editor-in-chief of EventMB. And on this episode, I'm joined by Ori Lahav, the Vice President Client Operations at Kennis Group and the President of IAPCO. We talk about why conferences need to think and act as brands. We talk about the reasons behind developing your own virtual event solution. We talk about some of the surprising challenges of virtual events. We talk about the advantages and disadvantages of different hybrid event models. We also talk about how event professionals need to be experts in on-demand content, in addition to all the other things they already need to be experts on. And we also talk about why harmonizing travel policies is really needed at this point to restart international in-person events. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Event Manager podcast, and please follow, subscribe, and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to have Ori Lahav on the show with us today. Ori is the Vice President of Client Operations at Kennis Group. Ori, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for having me.
You're really welcome. Ori, we've met quite a few years ago. I know a lot about your work, but for anybody who's not familiar with you and what you do, could you give us a short kind of introduction to your, how did you arrive in this crazy world of events and what are you doing right now?
It's funny you say crazy world, but it is. Actually, I wasn't born to the meeting industry. I've joined Kennis Group a little bit more than 8 years ago. My background is a little bit different. I'm a marketing person. I work in different industries, work a lot in the telecom industry, work in the automotive industry, and just before joining Kennis, I worked for a startup called Better Place that has raised $900 million in building an infrastructure to charge electric cars. I owned an electric cars more than 10 years ago, and I'm a big fan of electric cars and technology. But at a certain point, the startup was sold in parts, unfortunately, and I got a call from a friend saying, "Listen, this company." He didn't even know the name, are looking for a VP marketing, and they're interviewing somebody that you managed in the past, and they want your reference. And I said, hold on, but we're almost, we're going to be out of business in a few weeks. Maybe I'm interested in the position. He said, wow, I didn't even think about it. Sorry, give me 2 minutes. Let me check. And 4 interviews afterwards, I started working for Kennis, which it was my first introduction to the business meeting and meeting industry, which is fascinating. I got hooked very quickly. So for 4 years, I run Kennis Marketing, which is a subsidiary of Kennis Group that deals with marketing and promotion of events. And after 4 years, I moved to manage the client management and operation and IT departments in Kennis, and started to be also involved in the industry. I joined IAPCO, the International Association of Professional Congress Organizers, as the council member a few years ago. I'm currently the president of the association.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that with us. And just out of curiosity, being a marketing person originally, when you look at marketing in the event industry, what do you see compared to the wider world of marketing?
Yeah, it's a different world, event and marketing promotion. Let's say the essence, the basics of marketing is more or less the same. If you know how to market the mobile phone, if you know how to market an electric car, the basics are the same if you want to promote a meeting. It also has obviously with the brand and fighting for awareness, right? Our mission as marketers is always being top of mind when it comes to the potential client. For us as a potential delegates, virtual or in person. In the past, it was the majority was in person, and then building on the brands. And I see all the conferences, the association events, the corporate events are brands, and they need to think as brand and to act as brands. And then when you build a right strategy, the skies are the limit. And of course, I've been involved with in the past with big budget doing TV commercials, radio commercials at that time, a lot of digital. Of course, the scope is different. I mean, the budgets are obviously different than huge corporate grants, but it's more interesting and more challenging what you can do with smaller amount and having a smart and effective way of promoting, especially using all the digital tools, not only social media, but online advertising, but also classical tools like word of mouth, and email marketing and so forth. So I think it's actually sometimes more challenging, but more interesting with limited amounts of what you can do promoting an event.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting. I'm always fascinated in terms of event marketing compared to other marketing. It always feels like it's a slightly different game, but the principles are the same, right? So, and it's like, and do you have anywhere particularly that you find inspiration to bring into event marketing?
Yeah, no, I follow what everybody follow, like the TED, and Simon Sinek is also, a person I follow. I hear a lot. Although he speaks about management, you can learn a lot about brands and brand management and growth through that. Hear a lot of podcasts. That's always a good, when you commute to the office. There's so much knowledge out there in the internet, so it's easy to find.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your journey and Candace's journey over the last 18, 19 months. It's obviously been a challenging time. Could you talk us a little bit through, how you pivoted or what you did when the pandemic really closed down events in March of last year, and how that's developed since then?
Yeah, well, it seems like years ago already, but yeah, I mean, we were one of the first companies to pivot a full event to virtual. It was the first week of April, and it was one of the conferences that was planned to be in Vienna. And 3 weeks beforehand, we realized it cannot happen, and we were debating if to postpone or to cancel. And I'm happy that we've decided to pivot to virtual. And we are lucky to have a strong IT company, a department in-house. So using, of course, the beginning third-party providers helping us with platform, but doing all the recording ourselves. And in 3 weeks, we found ourselves recording 250 speakers, doing live session, doing a virtual exhibition, and it was just amazing. And this is how we, let's say, acted more or less, let's say Q2, 3 of 2020, when we realized very quickly that we don't want to be dependent on a third-party providers, and we want to build our own solution, because we realized it will take time. We need it. It's a good opportunity to accelerate whatever we dreamt about maybe a few years ago when we only spoke about it. And so we have developed our own Virtuos, what we call our own virtual platform, in-house, and it was launched last November. And I think we've done over 40 or 50 events already on this platform, very successful. And we have developed it in sprint, what I call. So every week we sit together, every week, it's still till today, and we say, okay, what's missing? What are client, feedbacks from our client? What do we see even in other platforms? And what is still missing? And we develop, and very quickly, within a week, we launch a new version. Every week we launch a new version. Sometimes it's small features, but back then it was, okay, I need bookmarks, so I want to add a session to my agenda. Okay, let's add it. That's simple. We want matchmaking solution. That's a little bit more complicated. Let's say AI, machine learning that recommends people for you to connect. So we took a local startup that developed this for us. It's built as an add-on on our platform. And it developed, and I think we have a very good and steady solution. I think that one of our peak was last April that we have ran the AN, the American Academy of Neurology event on this platform, which is a huge event with was 16,000 people with 2,500 speakers, thousands of posters. And of course, all our association, all core PCR clients are running on this platform. So we're very happy in how we progressed in this 18 months.
So I have a couple of questions around the platform. Did you develop it from scratch, or did you kind of white label different products and kind of mix it together in the way that you thought would work the best?
I would say the majority is built from scratch. And I would say 80% of it, it's code being written. Of course, we have some, I would say, external add-ons. Registration system is still our own old registration system that we use for the in-person events. But for streaming services, we took external streaming service, and that's another example that we're now developing in-house our own streamer, let's say, that we actually started testing in some of the recent events, and obviously we're gonna introduce it in a couple of weeks. So yeah, but I would say about 80% was everything from scratch, and then we like the matchmaking solution that we have taken with as an add-on, with the vision of being 100% independent.
Okay. And so what was the main driver to building that? Was it the independence? Were you kind of missing features? Were you sort of having to use multiple platforms to get the features that you wanted? Because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but mainly kind of academic and scientific conferences, that is your world, right? So you have poster sessions, you have poster reviews, you have lots of different sort of types of sessions that are maybe not always available or not easy to kind of replicate in a virtual world, right? Was that a driver as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, about 80% of our business is medical, scientific, life science, medical associations. We do also corporate. We did some events for Rolls-Royce and so forth. But yeah, the majority is, and they are very unique, as you mentioned. They have specific needs and specific sessions. And also the scientific program management they're using the way we built it is fully integrated with a single sign-on and an API that gives you a seamless experience. So that's one thing. So that's obviously one of the reasons, because we knew that it's not a typical event. It's not a typical corporate event. It's not a product launch. So it's an association, medical, life science event. So that's one reason. The second reason, of course, at least at the beginning, that there weren't so many platform others. And we were one of the 8,000 clients that wanted to reach out to one of the well-established virtual platform. And we felt that when it comes to service. And, we wanted to make sure that we provide a good service to our clients. And that's, let's say, that the second reason. And the third reason, as I mentioned, we saw it's not gonna, it's not gonna end up into 3 months and COVID will just disappear. We understood that this is an opportunity for us to develop, to accelerate our digital services for the long term. Because, we'll speak maybe about the future later on, but, virtual is here to stay in a way. So you gotta have a good solution in-house. And maybe the fourth reason is that it allows you to better cater to your clients, because we have big clients with different needs, and we are much more flexible and adaptable in a way that, we sit with our IT director saying, this client wants this, feature a little bit different. All right, let's do it. If you are dependent on a third party that, it's not going to be flexible to each client needs, right? You have a product. This is this is what you have on your shelf. This is what you can take. This is the limitation of what you can, brand and so forth. And it allows us also to really rebrand differently every platform. So if a conference was planned to be in Toronto, we can look as, you enter the Toronto MTCCO, the background will be the skyline of Toronto, and gives you, the feel that you are actually at the venue that was, originally was supposed to, the meeting should have been. Those are the main reasons, I would say.
I'd love to also talk about the challenges, right? I mean, creating your own tool must have challenges associated with it. Are you able to share any of those that you think maybe surprised you, or maybe some of the challenges that you weren't expecting in kind of having your own tool?
Yeah, I mean, it's not only about the tools; it's about the skills of people. I mean, the first surprise when we, back then in April when we shifted the first meeting, the first surprise about the simple recording process with the speaker. Again, most of our speakers are doctors, professors, researchers. Didn't have a lot of experience with Zoom or recording. And we thought at the beginning, all right, we're going to send them a Zoom link. They're just going to record themselves, and everything will be fine. And of course, it didn't happen. And we know that today. Now everybody realized that, and we figure out very quickly that we need to walk them hand in hand. So we have I think a team of about 20 people that are just recording speakers. So it started with people in-house that we shifted people from other professions, from other teams. So if you had people doing hotel sales or hotel operation, of course there's no hotels to sell at that point. Let's train them how to record speakers. Or we have people from venue procurement or people. And so and at a certain point we had this huge group of people that recording people. Now it's a mix between in-house and freelancers that work with us on recording speakers. So that was a big surprise on one hand. And the other one is, of course, the need of everybody in the industry to understand more about the world of video production. Because in order to ensure that people has the maximum experience for the participant in the virtual events, we realized that we need to make sure that those virtual events looks more like a TV show, more like a TV production. And this was skills that we obviously didn't have in-house. So we actually recruited some people with background in production, in TV production, in content editing, or content creation. And of course, we trained our people to be more minded for that. Of course, we have our own meeting design people and meeting architect in-house, but it's a little bit different when it comes to in-person versus virtual. So this is something we need to train the team, even for the people who are dealing with the scientific committee. So we have a scientific program coordinator that is the point of contact to the scientific committee. He or she will have to help them, navigate them, and explain how to think differently about the session and the session format and the session types, and even the basic of the program building. Okay, how much break do you need between session? Again, it's very different what we experience on site. So that I don't know if it's a surprise, but it definitely was something that we need to work on, train the people, upskill them, and we still do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of you mentioned recordings, what percentage would you say are sort of pre-records of the work that you do in scientific and academic conferences?
I would say that, it depends from Congress to Congress, but I would say that about 80% is pre-recorded, but always have a live element. So the presentation are usually pre-recorded, and then the speakers join for live Q&A. I would say that's the majority of what we've seen so far. Usually the main big session, the most important one, the opening, the closing are live. Some of the keynote plenary speakers could be live, but then the rest of the content is pre-recorded with a live element. I think it's very important for being a live element, because again, if we look back at the beginning, one of our first virtual events, the client insisted to record everything, almost no live element. And although we insisted, saying, that is not what delegates are looking for, they say, we don't want to take any risks. It was their first experience in virtual meeting. And when the meeting opened up, and of course we provide an online chat support to the delegates for any technical need or any question. And the comments we got from people, I didn't sign up for a YouTube channel for this event, right? They want this live interactivity element in it. Of course, this client already is doing his second virtual event this November, and I think the program will look completely different.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, I think from our research, what keeps coming up is engagement continues to be challenging in virtual events, and also monetizing virtual events. Because you have sponsors, mainly sponsorship seems to be the main source of monetization. I think a lot of academic and scientific conferences do charge, but it's not the equivalent fee. It's not the same kind of business model. Any thoughts on the business model side? And I think there's kind of two sides to that question. One is, your monetization, Kenneth, as a business. How did you, kind of make that work for you? But also, how did you help your clients monetize their events?
Now I'm going to connect all the dots of what we started speaking about marketing. I think that marketing has shifted in the virtual, still is in the beginning, to educating the market. Again, one of our challenges in marketing is of course convincing you, right, to choose the brand. But at a certain point, especially in virtual event, it shifted to educate the market. And when I say educate the market, educate the delegates. Very simple, how do I experience virtual events from how to use a virtual platform and how to engage with people, but also to sponsors. And I think we invested a lot of time in educating and working with our sponsors and exhibitors how to get the most out of virtual events. And I think that the challenge for the sponsor and exhibitors, and we saw it also from our survey that we did last year and this year, and we saw a shift. One of the challenges we saw at the beginning is that exhibitors or sponsored still used to measure success in the old way. So for them, number of visits to the virtual booth was the way they measured success, which I believe it's wrong, because in the virtual world, of course, yeah, it's very important, right? You want to have people in your virtual booth, but what's more important is that you want to work on the brand awareness, on making sure that you reach at the top of mind of the virtual conference delegate. And you do that by education. They do a lot of satellite symposia. So invest, and this is, again, something we saw from the survey. That is what the delegates are looking from sponsors. They want to meet their experts. You want to speak with them. It's less about, seeing a PDF brochure in the virtual lobby. So we invested a lot of time in educating and working with our exhibitors and sponsors to ensure that they feel, I would say, some of return on investment. And yes, we saw that they still support the event. Of course, it's not in the same levels of an in-person meeting, but are still high, but also the expenses are different for them and for the organizers. And so the support remained strong enough to ensure that our association are still, saw a really good profit line from their event. So, I didn't see the monetizing as a big issue thus far, at least for our clients.
Cool. And thinking to the future, we're hopefully seeing events opening up, or at least the opportunity for in-person events. If for any reason we can't do live events, do you see there being a solid business model there? Do you see it able to continue in a virtual setting?
We are in the people business, right? Mm-hmm. I don't see any reason why we won't go back to an in-person element. And I say element because it will be part of a holistic solution. I mentioned, we all know that virtual is here to stay, and hybrid is a big buzzword. But I had experienced my first in-person event in July, which was a year and a half almost after I've been in an in-person event. And I was so happy. To see a speaker standing on stage and to interact with him after in the break, it's priceless. It cannot be replaced in a virtual experience. So that means that the future objective of an in-person meeting will be maybe a little bit different. It will be focused more on, the networking, the building the community, hands-on, especially for our medical events. They need a lot of hands-on workshops and sessions, and that is not, it's difficult to replace in the virtual settings. And so that more socializing. but content and education can still be consumed online. I think a lot of associations realize that. And if, years ago we spoken about doing some sort of e-learning platform and making sure that the education is available also online. They looked at us and say, why do I need it? Now everybody realized, again, association realized, okay, we can educate our members, our doctors, our researchers through online content. So we're gonna see a mix. We're gonna see, a lot of people say 365, or maybe kind of 365 learning that will be combined with in-person and virtual events throughout the year.
Okay. I think that's a vision, a pretty solid vision for the future. And you're confident that the business models around this can work, that they're, because to be direct, I think a lot of companies, and I don't know if this is the case with Kennis, rely on commissions, rely on hospitality commissions, hotel commissions, venue commissions as a big part of their revenue. And without the kind of in-person, or with a smaller in-person revenue, that could be challenging for many companies. How do you see that unfolding?
Of course, if the company of the founder of Kennis, if he knew that will be the reality, maybe the company have been built differently, right? But this is, we need to manage what we have. And I think that, yes, it's true that we cannot rely more, on hotels' profits from, selling hotel. Although we will never build on commissions. It is true that the accommodation services was a big percentage out of all the PCO's revenues. I think we were able to replace it also by owning our own virtual platform, which is replacing the venue. So we now not only offering the organizational service, we also have the venue for us, the virtual venue, I would say, but it's another stream of obviously another source of income and revenue for us. Yes, we need to work leaner in a way, but also, we work with less other, third-party providers. The management of the virtual event, it's quite different. You need more IT people versus, I would say, other team members. And it can be viable. It can be viable for us and for the clients. However, if you look at the short term, let's say 2022, when it's the uncertainty between, okay, are we going to really have an in-person meeting? Is it going to be a hybrid meeting? It's going to be only virtual. This is where I see the risk. We need to manage this risk, especially when you need to contract a venue or you don't need to contract a venue. Are you booking hotels or not? That is something we have to be very careful with, because that can put everybody in risk, us and the client and the association. I think for the long term, it would be much more clear, and then we can manage, the revenue stream in a more smarter way.
So I'd like to touch on this kind of periods, these different periods, and I think we're all hopeful that soon we have an option to meet in person if we want, put virtual, create hybrid, whatever we want to do. But at the moment, we're in this period that I kind of anecdotally call unpivot, which is kind of coming out of a virtual pivot in a way. And I saw a press release recently that you put out about a few events that you did very successfully, and I noticed that there was a sort of an allusion to a backup plan of how to make an event happen. And I talked with Magdalena, one of your colleagues, about it, and she explained the plans that you had to put in place to have this event happen in the US, where a European-based team, I think Spain-based team, was managing it. Could you kind of explain what happened and how that all unfolded?
Yes, I mean, we did conduct two in-person events, full in-person events, this September, and we're still having in plans a few more in-person events in coming December. So But I would want to start saying the team was excited, super excited to be on site. For them, it was like riding a bicycle. I mean, they were so excited to see the clients face to face after not seeing them for almost 2 years, to cater the delegates, the speakers, and everything like we used to do once, and everybody was very excited about this. However, of course, we didn't know what's going to happen until last minute. And with travel restrictions, we have a team coming from different places worldwide. So we have typical from Amsterdam, from Bulgaria, from Spain, from Israel, and so forth. And every country has a different limitation. Can we access the conference? One of them was in Paris, one in the US. Can we really access? And the regulations are changing by the minute. So what do you do if this and this person cannot access, or you have to go to quarantine? How do you replace? Do you take local stuff? How do you train the local stuff? What happens if a speaker will not be able to attend? All those plan B, C, and we've given a lot of thought. We actually did a pre-recording for all the speakers because we didn't know if they will come or not, if they were able to attend or not until the last minute. And so, we've invested a lot of that, although everybody was super excited of coming and seeing an in-person event. It's not easy to operate with all the restriction. Do we need a PCR test before you enter the venue? Yes or no? Do you need to show vaccination proof? Yes or no? What are the local regulations? What are the airlines regulations? It's quite complex. Unfortunately, I think this is where and we'll definitely do it through IAPCO as well, will call government to streamline all the regulations. So I'm all in favor of, restriction that makes sense, but as long as everybody is the same. So for example, within the huge region like the EU, okay, if you want to access the country, you need to show PCR, negative PCR test and a vaccination rate, that's fine. But make sure that all countries has the same regulation, because I came back last week from Geneva, and the fact that I'm fully vaccinated was fine for me to enter. But a month ago, I was already fully vaccinated, I was in Lausanne, which is still Switzerland, and I had to show a PCR negative test. So it's quite confusing, it's quite complex. And I hope that, it's at least this part will be streamlined to something that is more, I don't mind being strict, but as long as we all unified in that sense.
Sure. And I think that the US with the news of, opening up is great news, but we're still a little uncertain of when and exactly how that's going to work, right? So hopefully that can be unified. I don't know if you have any other events happening in the US, but I hear that some conferences and some events are placing their staff in countries like Canada and other countries so that they can stay there for the quarantine period and then travel to the US. Is that something that you have in place for any of your events, or are you looking at kind of actions like that?
To be honest, I don't expect any of my team members, my staff, to force them in a way to be quarantined for 14 days. If they have to be quarantined either when coming back or traveling, I will find somebody else, because I don't think it's fair for people to be quarantined unless they are willing to and want to, for 10 or 14 days just to operate an event. And this again, the example we mentioned in the US, we brought people from Mexico, from our team in Mexico, but for them it was easier to access the US to operate the team than from people from Spain, because of all the the restriction entering the US right now. So I would rather find a solution that will not force people to quarantine.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid comment, and we're hoping to streamline these solutions very, very quickly, which would be great. So we talked a little bit already about the future of the industry, and you've already talked about some of the challenges. I wanted to get your kind of thoughts on hybrid. What that means for you, and is it the future? Do you see it being part of lots of events? And then there's a few other kind of future trends that I'd like to pick on, but let's start with hybrid.
Yeah, I'm a person who think that hybrid is a little bit of a overbuzzed word, and for me, it's just finding the right solution for the right association or the right event. we have invested a lot of time and effort already months ago about trying to find the best hybrid scenario, because we all know this hybrid poses, brings a lot of challenges, many, especially financially for us and for the clients and for the association, because we all understand you have double expenses, you have less income, simple math, right? So what is the best solution, I would say, that will able to still facilitate this need for people, facilitating people in person and virtual in a way that will make financial sense, that it will make sense also when it comes to the delegates experience. And we have this task force that we've done here in-house that worked for weeks and weeks, because there's also implications on the way that the operation team work. Do we need to double the team and so forth? And we came up more or less with 3 models that will make sense. And I'll give the high level without going into too much detail. So the first one is what I call hybrid tool. It's actually the disconnected model, because it's an in-person event and a virtual event, not on the same days. So for example, you have an in-person event for, 2.5 days. You're probably going to have less people than you usually, the association is used to. You get that. So you make this program smaller. The length of the program is shorter, but you put a lot of emphasis on the experience of the people enjoying the fact that they are there. They get, all the socialing part, the networking part, the hands-on experience, and you take the opportunity and capture the content. 2, 3, 4, 7 days afterwards, you launch the virtual events. For those who couldn't participate on site, you use the content you captured during the in-person events, plus some live elements, plus additional content, and you create a virtual event. So there's 2 separate events with under, let's say, one roof. That's I would call disconnected model, and let's say the less riskier model than all of them. The second model, which I call hybrid top, or we call it also 50-50. What happens when 50% of the delegates are there in person and 50%, more or less, are virtual. Here, very similar. It is an event that's happening on the same days. It's not a disconnected model, but we cut 50% of the content that is happening on site. So for example, if we're supposed to be, the conference had 10 parallel rooms, 10 parallel sessions every day. You cut them in half. You do only 5 in person, and the rest of the 5 are only recorded or only streamed on the virtual platform. And then you, again, shorten a little bit the days of the events, same elements of, putting a lot of emphasis on the experience of the in-person, of those delegates who are coming on site. And then those who join virtually enjoy, of course, all the content, but the cost is reduced by, reducing the space, reducing the in-person program.
And so just to be clear, you're saying reduce the content for everybody, or do the online audience get more content than the on-site audience?
Those who come on-site get obviously access to the virtual platform. So in any case, they have access to the entire program afterwards. But before the virtual world, when I come to an in-person meeting, I can choose only one session hall that I can access at the same time, right? So that is the same experience happening tomorrow, but I will have access to the virtual platform. We'll have all the 10 parallels, all the content. But I actually reduce the expenses by having only half of it happening on site and half of it happening online. I hope it makes sense. And the third model is, I would say, we call it hybrid max. It's the most close one to format to the in-person meeting, when you have at least 80% of the delegates on site and 20% online. Then, of course, it's a regular meeting. You stream all the content like what a hybrid usually meant in the past. I just want to say about the engagement and the interactivity going on between the audiences. I'm a person who thinks that we don't need to force this engagement between the different audiences, because the person sitting at home with his pajamas watching a session on his computer or in TV in the living room I don't think he's looking to interact and engage with the person who sits in a session hall, sitting and seeing the speaker, because the person is sitting in a session hall want to interact with the person sitting next to him, and not with the person sitting at home. So I'm against. Sorry, against maybe it's a harsh word, but I don't think we need to force this interactivity between the audience. We need to ensure that each audience has its own networking opportunities. And that obviously has an implication on how we need to operate this hybrid event.
I think that's very fair. I think, yeah, I have the same. We've done some research about this, and actually it comes out at around 70 or 80%, between 70 and 80%, think that there is a need to engage between the audiences. I have to say that I'm more on your camp. I think that particularly the on-site audience, I think creating situations where you're asking an on-site audience member to engage with somebody who's online, there has to be a really, really compelling reason for that to happen. You know, it has to be like a VIP speaker that you really want to meet, or someone that you really want to meet. And that's okay if you do. But it does feel strange to kind of force people on site to connect with people online, because it's, there's so much of that human engagement factor.
And we've done also a few surveys, and we saw that, the end of the day, what's important for delegates, especially in our world that it's, more medical life science, is the content, right? The content is still the king. They come to be educated, to learn, to get, gain the CME accreditation. It's less about the networking. So if we look at the priority of why to attend the virtual meeting, networking will be one of the I would believe it's 4 or 5 place. After education about meeting the experts and the accreditation, and the networking comes in the end. It might be different from a trade exhibition or shows like IMAX. There it's probably very different, but for an education event, the networking part is important, but less.
I think that's fascinating, because I hear other people doing, other types of events, as you say, where networking comes up, I think top or maybe second. It becomes a really important part, particularly for the on-site experience. But I can see why it would be different in an academic and scientific context. What about, I'm not necessarily trying to put you on the spot, but what about this idea of passive learning, right? Because I agree, we don't necessarily want to force people to do that, and people want to kind of access the content and watch it as, whenever they want. And there may be reasons why they want their CMEs, et cetera, and they just want to have access and get those credits. But, learning and teaching, all these kind of methodologies that we have access to kind of show us that if we're passively just listening, we're not really learning, or we're not learning as much as if we're engaging with the content and if there's sort of some sort of interaction. Is that just not the responsibility of us as planners, like just let people do whatever they want? Or should we be actively engaging or getting speakers and event owners to create engagement around content? Because I agree, content is great, but if it just becomes a YouTube channel, like you said about your first conference, then we're probably not doing a great service to that association or to the members of that association.
I 100% agree with you. I think that it's our role and our responsibility to support and help our clients, ensuring that this education, that the other side that need to consume this knowledge and education, do it in a way that will show what we call return on education, and absolutely they are looking for this interactivity and engagement, and this is the reason why we are investing a lot in virtual studios, in TV production style of sessions, with our content editor, because we didn't have a content editor in the past for a scientific meeting. But of course now we need, because we understand that you can't be passive, as you mentioned, or at least for the virtual meeting or whatever going to be hybrid meeting in the future, It has to be interactive. It has to be engaging, because this is how you keep people on board with you. And we all speak about attention span of people viewing and how it's dropped. And now with the simple polling and ask the speaker questions and different tricks that we do in the session, you raise the attention again, and it drops, and you raise it again, and it drops, and you raise it again. And I fully agree. This is our role as organizers to ensure that those events or those sessions are streamed, are broadcasted in the best way that the other side can consume it and will acknowledge it, and will come back as retaining this as a potential future delegate for this conference.
I agree. And going kind of expanding on that a little bit, what about the on-demand content? I think event organizers are sort of being asked to create, like mini Netflix or kind of YouTube collections of content. Is that something that we're kind of qualified to do? And how do we kind of do that well?
The quick answer is yes. I think that there's a need for that. So if we spoke previously on the element of the live session and the fact that it has to be interactive and engagement, in addition, you need to offer also the passive VOD style of watching, because people want to catch up whatever they didn't see live, or they have spare time, or they sit on the train to work and they can catch a session. It's very important. So we obviously record all the content. All the content is available as a VOD, usually about 3 months after the event, to all the delegates. People are still buying the content, but it has to turn into kind of e-learning as I don't like the modeling, but kind of online education that's happening for the members of the association or for the community members. We haven't spoken about community, but it's definitely one of the future formats that we're probably going to speak about. And the way that you need to offer this content is by ensuring that every session is recommended to the right person. So we speak about the Netflix model, the AI model of how do you recommend a session to a person. That's a lot of work. Need to be ensured that you're tagging the session right, you have the profiling right, and you match the content to a person. This is something we're working on. This is probably going to be the future of how do you consume those recordings, and then it will become more efficient.
So is that something that you're working on with your own tools so that you can provide that to clients, not only the event, but then a library and a place where attendees the community can go back to and kind of keep engaged?
Absolutely working on it. And so it's I would say it's now semi-manual, will be completely automated in the future. But absolutely, I think that's the future of content consuming, I would say.
Yeah, it does make sense, because we're creating so much content from events. Then we also need to be experts at what do we do with that content afterwards. If we just, if it just ends up on a shelf or a virtual shelf, but nobody actually watches it, then it's a bit of a waste for everybody involved.
Yeah, there's too much content out there right now. I mean, this is one of the outcome of this whole virtual world. So yeah, we need to ensure that we offer our delegates the right content for them.
Yeah. So it's a discovery element, but also I think it's also a speed element, and tell me if I'm wrong, but if you leave a content for too long before editing it and making it kind of watchable, it's not as exciting, right? People aren't as interested in it, particularly in a scientific and academic sense. You want to have the latest information, right? So it's important to be able to do that at a reasonable speed so that you keep that momentum from the event, and then the content becomes relevant at the right time.
And yeah, I agree. And also what we've done is that we invested in a player that not only you see the recorded session, but it has OCR elements that allows you, it has all the captioning, all the slides. You can search by texting a slide. You can easily jump to a specific slide, and it will take you to the right place. And of course the voice to text. And so you see it's sometimes easier to consume when you also see kind of a subtitles or captioning of the text. So the way you capture is not only just sitting and viewing, but it gives you a whole experience of slide, text, the ability also to run it faster or slower if you need to, go back if you didn't catch it properly. So we have more tools to enable a better content consumption.
It sounds like the role of the event professional keeps getting more and more complex, and there's more layers to it. Yes. So I wanted to kind of end with a few a little bit more general questions. And one is, we've seen a lot of people leave the industry, unfortunately, and there are young people hopefully joining the industry. Do you have any advice for those younger people joining the industry, or people who've left and are maybe considering coming back? What would you say to them? Hopefully to convince them to come to the industry, but maybe you don't want to come to the industry.
I mean, first of all, it's a global challenge right now to recruit people. I see it, and I speak to a lot of people within our industry, and we're kind of mapped as an industry in risk in a way. So first of all, we need to ensure that governments are still supporting and giving some sort of a safety net to the meeting industry, especially those who work on a local level, maybe less on the international level. But we have a lot of PCO that the majority of the work comes from the local market. And if the governments can at least offer some sort of safety net for them, that will be very important. But this is an amazing industry that has accelerated, I think, maybe beside food delivery, the fastest in this pandemic than any other industry. And it's super exciting. And the combination in the future between what we have spoken all the last hour about the in-person, the virtual, the technology, and it's, this combination is fascinating. It's truly globally, even if it's only virtually. So I'm obviously hooked. I'm excited. I'm not, everyone who is considering to come to the meeting industry, I highly recommend.
Perfect. Always good to hear. And the last question that I like to ask all our guests, I'd love to get a recommendation from you for someone else that we should have as a guest on the Event Manager podcast.
He's a ex-TED speaker. His name is Lior Tzoref. He, I don't know, has a famous TED talk that he brought a bull on stage because he showed how accurate his crowdsourcing. And he wrote a book about how you make decision by crowdsourcing. I know him very well. He's an Israeli like me. Very fascinating. He's a professional speaker. He speaks at a lot of events. He knows the meeting industry. So highly recommend. I can connect you both together.
That sounds great. I need to go search for this TED Talk now with a bull on stage. I don't think I've seen that one, so I need to go and check that out. Ori, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being our guest. It's been fascinating talking to you. I took lots of notes, so we're going to add those to the podcast notes. Just want to appreciate, say thank you for your time. And if you're listening to the podcast, make sure you subscribe, rate, review the podcast. We'd love to have you on next week again. Again, thank you, Ori. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Event Manager podcast. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. For the latest news and the best articles on technology and innovation in the event industry, head over to eventmb.com.